Today on to speakonline.com, we are putting activist judges on trial. Not literally, but judging by some of this guy's rhetoric, that might be next. Instead, we are doing what some seem allergic to. That's right, actual analysis. And why? Because when any president and press secretary start throwing around phrases like activist judge every time a court decision doesn't go their way, that's not just political theater, that's a strategy to undermine judicial rulings that contravene the executive branch's interests. I'm Charles Randolph, and this is to speakonline.com. Let's watch and reflect.
And now a judge who's an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this.
That this is an activist judge.
This phrase, activist judge, and those synonymous with it, has been wielded with particular frequency by President Donald Trump and Caroline Leavitt, and a host of at-hand right-wing parrots. Sorry, meant to say right-wing influencers during the period of 2023 to 2025. But let's not forget the backstory with the whole losing the 2020 election, which, on a side note, for a man representing a hyper-masculine party, I gotta say, a bit of a whiner, but I get it. You take what you can get. To understand the current discourse, we must first establish a clear definition of activist judge. In legal scholarship, judicial activism refers to a judicial philosophy wherein judges are perceived to allow their personal views or policy preferences to guide their decisions, rather than adhering strictly to the letter of the law or established precedent. Black's Law Dictionary defines judicial activism as a philosophy of judicial decision-making whereby judges allow their personal views about public policy, among other factors, to guide their decisions. This stands in contrast to judicial restraint, which advocates for deference to the elected branches of government, upholding laws unless they unequivocally violate the Constitution. The concept of judicial restraint aligns with Alexander Hamilton's vision in Federalist No. 78, where he described the judiciary as the least dangerous branch, possessing neither force nor will, but merely judgment. Hamilton envisioned courts as neutral arbiters, insulated from political pressures, empowered to strike down unconstitutional laws, but otherwise limited in their influence. This principle of judicial independence is enshrined in the Constitution through mechanisms such as life tenure and salary protections for federal judges, ensuring they can rule impartially without fear of retribution. While on money, I'm so happy we came to the collective conclusion in society that somehow continuing to cut taxes for the most wealthy and defunding social services will benefit the common working class individual makes perfect sense. It really sticks it to the man. Not that man, but some man. However, the term activist judge has evolved into a pejorative in political rhetoric, often used to discredit judges whose rulings are unfavorable to a particular agenda. This dilution of the term's meaning has rendered it a catchphrase rather than a precise critique. Historically, judicial activism has produced both celebrated and reveled outcomes. The Warren Court's decision in Brown v. Board of Education, which overturned Plessy v. Ferguson and ended racial segregation in schools, is often hailed as a triumph of judicial activism. Conversely, the Lochner-era court's decision in Lochner v. New York, which struck down labor regulations, is now widely regarded as an example of judicial overreach. These cases illustrate that the label of activist is often applied retrospectively, based on whether one agrees with the outcome. In summary, while a true activist judge may be one who prioritizes personal beliefs over legal principles, in contemporary political discourse, the term is frequently used as a rhetorical weapon to undermine judicial legitimacy. This brings us to the heart of our investigation: how Donald Trump and Caroline Leavitt have wielded this label to frame the judiciary as biased and illegitimate. Let's take a look at some examples of this in action. In August 2023, following his indictment for alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election, Trump took to Truth Social to denounce U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, who was assigned to his case. He posted a screenshot of a tweet by Mike Davis stating, "This is an Obama left-wing activist judge in D.C. whose husband also got appointed by Obama as a D.C. judge openly admitted she's running election interference against Trump." This statement is illustrative of Trump's approach. By labeling Chutkan as an activist, he sought to frame her as politically motivated rather than impartial. However, it is crucial to note that while the judge was appointed by President Obama, there is no evidence to suggest that her rulings were anything but legally sound. However, it served its purpose, that is, to inoculate his supporters against any adverse rulings from her court. Similarly, during his New York civil fraud trial in late 2023, Trump repeatedly attacked Justice Arthur of the New York Supreme Court, calling him a Trump-hating judge. In one instance, when according to The Guardian, the personal attacks against the judge's daughter came to a head when Trump attacked her for supposedly using a photo of him behind bars as a profile picture for her X account. "The photo makes it completely impossible for me to get a fair trial," Trump wrote. But the account appeared to be bogus. The handle for the X account had belonged to Lauren Merchant, but she had deleted that account, a court spokesperson said. Someone else, it is unclear who, had taken over the handle and used the photo. This prompted the judge to expand an existing gag order to protect the judge's family members or family members of staff. The judge's decision was grounded in established New York fraud law and a meticulous review of the evidence. Hardly the hallmarks of judicial activism. You can see this here. That's a 92-page PDF link just littered with all the fantastic evidence you want to find to continue to keep supporting him. Promise. In the Manhattan criminal case concerning hush money payments, Trump assailed the judge Juan Merchant, calling him crooked and conflicted, despite the lack of any evidence of impropriety. Trump's narrative was clear. The judge's alleged bias rendered the trial illegitimate. Perhaps the most striking example occurred in March 2025 when Trump, having returned to the presidency, clashed with U.S. District Judge James Boasberg over a deportation order. After the judge issued an injunction halting Trump's mass deportation of migrants, Trump erupted on social media, calling the judge a radical left lunatic judge and demanding his impeachment. This rhetoric framed a routine judicial action, enforcing due process, as an assault on presidential authority. Caroline, as Trump's spokesperson, amplified this narrative. In a March 2025 press briefing, she decreed that activist federal judges who were acting as partisan activists from the bench and trying to dictate policy. She urged the Supreme Court to rein them in, effectively politicizing the judiciary from the White House podium. Even more alarmingly, in April 2025, when asked if the administration might arrest judges, the press secretary refused to rule it out, stating, "Anyone who is breaking the law or obstructing puts themselves at risk of being prosecuted." This statement was widely interpreted as a veiled threat against the judiciary, making a significant escalation in the administration's hostility toward the courts. So, are all these judges just haters? I emphasize all because there's a lot and many more instances than can hold your attention span, or is he just a sore loser? Are these judges making law or just enforcing existing law? That's a big one. The strategic intent behind this rhetoric is evident. By branding, and we all know he's got a record of selling a brand that sucks, judges as activists, crooked, radical, etc., Trump and Levitt seek to delegitimize any legal setbacks as the product of bias rather than the rule of law. This framing serves multiple purposes. It galvanizes Trump's base, deflects attention from the substance of the legal cases, and lays the groundwork for defying judicial authority. There is a distinctive pattern of behavior, what began as talking some trash to blatantly undermining judicial authority, banking on that public opinion. And Trump, I get it. I really do. I love talking trash, but the problem is you set an example for political discourse and acceptable public behavior, whereas I'm just a guy with authority issues. But that's what's at stake. If the public loses faith in courts, who will referee disputes? The risk of political violence or constitutional breakdown increases. The rule of law means Even leaders can be held accountable. If activist judge smears succeed, a leader can do wrong and just blame the judge, escaping accountability. That's how corrupt or authoritarian regimes function. This normalization of defiance, judicial politicization, loss of neutral arbiters, and democratic norms decay, reinforcing a culture of might makes right, could replace the rule of law. Whoever holds power does what they want. Courts be damned. That is the recipe for what political scientists call competitive authoritarianism. Recap: that activist judge is more than an insult. It's part of a narrative that could corrode our justice system. It's essential to separate fact from rhetoric. The judges under attack largely were just doing their jobs, applying law to facts. In closing, America stands at a precipice where how leaders and citizens respond to this anti-judiciary rhetoric will determine whether this nation's experiment in constitutional government remains robust. Will we hold to the norm that court orders must be obeyed and disputes settled by law? Or will we slide into the pattern of countries where each faction only respects verdicts in its favor? The answer will significantly define the quality of American democracy moving forward. As the political scientists Levitsky and Zablot warn, democratic institutions alone cannot defend themselves. It takes leaders and citizens committed to the democratic norms to do so. The judiciary's fate, and by extension, the rule of law, ultimately rests on collective societal rejection of the notion that judges are just activists to be ignored, and on a reaffirmation that the rule of law is fundamental to freedom. If you enjoyed this and would like to help support my work, please visit my website to speakonline.com, where you can read my articles, check out some of my creative work, and can become a member because, like I said, I have authority issues, so I made my own Patreon. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support is appreciated. Thank you for watching.